Hey, welcome to the NPR panel. I forget what this is called. What is NPR and why is it so cool? Is that the title? Anyway, it is now.
It is now.
It is now.
It is now.
So obviously this talk, if you guys are interested in NPR, you already know what it is. But if you don't know what NPR is, it's non-photorealistic rendering, which is essentially any kind of like stylized rendering that isn't, mimicking reality, right? So you can really exaggerate a lot of things, and it includes like stylized animation as well and things like that. So we are obviously enthusiasts in this field. That's why we're here. So I'd like to introduce everybody. First of all, my name is Dillon Gu. I own DillonGoo Studios. We make animations. Yeah, that's cool. We have a YouTube channel. It's a lot of fun. We get to make cool stuff, and we get to dabble in 3D anime. That's kind of our specialty. So yeah, that's me. We'll go over to, we'll start with Wyatt.
Hi, I am Wyatt Hall. I graduated kind of recently in 2020, and I didn't even major in animation, but I really enjoyed animating, and like I taught myself everything that I could about it, and I have since like started a small animation studio, and we work on narrative and commercial projects of all kinds. And my goal in like every project that I do is really to push the stylization and the artistic creativity that we're putting into the work that we do. And we have a lot of fun.
Whoa, same. That's crazy. We have so much in common. All right,
it's gonna accuse you of plagiarism.
A studio? What? No, yeah. So we're gonna.
I think we're gonna find we all have something in common here.
Yeah, we're all pretty much the same person. So, all right, Mira, you're next.
Hi. I am not affiliated with anyone here, but I'm trapped in this little. I'm trapped in like the bounds of this little box. There's no life of any kind outside here, but I'm trapped here, and I'm here to talk about absolutely nothing because I don't know what NPR is.
Yeah, are you even talking? We don't know. You have a mask on, so it's a mystery. Maybe you dub this later. Who knows? If that even is your real name, Mira. But yes. Anyway, Mira is a great animator, and apparently a fan of Hatsune Miku. So that's important information. Cool. Sharon, you're next.
Hello, I'm Sharon Snow, and I'm a VFX supervisor at Sony Pictures Imageworks. You guys might know me from... Oh, thank you.
Yeah, woo.
You guys might know me from Spider-Verse and throwing my glasses on stage once.
Yes, classic. Classic moment. Yeah. For those guys who haven't seen the previous Blender Conference videos, she did a talk there for Spider-Verse, and it was really good. So check it out. If you like NPR, you'll love it. Yeah. Chris, you're next.
Hi, my name is Chris Boylan. I'm an independent animator going under the name ZEROSEVEN Animation. I'm also an animation director, CG supervisor, freelance, primarily focused in non-photorealistic rendering. Yeah, I love everything about non-photorealistic rendering. I think a lot of us are inspired by 2D animation and how we can kind of bring that aesthetic into CG, and I'm really excited to talk with all the people here.
That's what it stands for.
Which part?
NPR.
Oh yeah.
That too.
Yeah, that's crazy. Chris, you also, just a quick shout out, you work at Titmouse, and you also worked on like Pokemon recently and stuff, right?
That's correct. So I started my career off as a character TD, and then worked my way into 2D animation. So I worked for Titmouse. We did a couple music videos there for Area 21. I CG supervised on Pantheon, which was a cyberpunk TV show that's on Amazon in New Zealand. So if you can find it there, go ahead and watch it. Then we worked for Pokemon Onimus Magus promo spot, which is awesome.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah,
yes. It's fantastic. So obviously we love NPR, in case that wasn't clear. So I think it's probably worth talking about why. Because obviously most people in the industry are doing realistic stuff. I mean, it's one of the more like prevalent parts of the industry, I'd say. Like VFX is a big part of the industry. Pixar, Disney, technically they're leaning more towards that photorealistic rendering style. They're going more stylized now, but generally speaking, like it's not as common to do stylized stuff. So what got you guys into NPR? Like what was the biggest inspiration for you guys, you think? Who wants to go first? Anybody?
Sorry, Wyatt again?
I mean,
move down the line.
Could.
I'm just gonna look at everybody. I think anime was a big thing.
Yes. So what's anime again? Sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
So
I'm unfamiliar with this.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't really consume much media outside of.
What's TV?
Oh yeah. Sorry. No. Yeah.
So Japanese animation, colloquially known as anime, at least in the States, in Japan, not to be confused with in Japan, they will call anything that is animated anime. But anime is it's a big influence. I think partly because as you're growing up, a lot of the animation that we have in the West is geared towards children, and at least that's 15 years ago for sure. And so you get to like you learn a lot of animation tropes, and you get familiar with like style and technique to a certain extent when you're young, and as you get older you start to mature a little bit. And I think that anime, specifically in the eyes of a Western audience, is a more mature form of animation and storytelling in a lot of ways, and that sort of causes a lot of artists and creative people to gravitate back to it as they mature and their storytelling sensibilities mature, which is really cool to see how you can take all these like more cinematic forms of expression and still use animation to its fullest extent. You're starting to sort of break beyond what you knew as a kid and explore more potential.
I would say what's interesting about you talking about anime is that we also need to recognize that the West kind of stopped producing as much 2D animation a while back.
Yeah.
And that has made anime one of the more accessible versions of NPR, like stylized stuff that we get to see. Like 2D animation in general is not as common in the West. So I think that plays a big part, especially with the newer generation, people who didn't grow up with like, the old Disney movies and stuff.
Definitely.
So, worth mentioning. Let's see. Chris, what do you got?
I mean, it's going to be pretty much the same. I think that for me, what it really came down to was, seeing videos online in the early days of like when people actually had access to the internet, and just seeing that one person could achieve a lot,
right?
And being inspired by that, and a lot of the first videos that I saw were made in Lightwave and were in an NPR style.
Oh,
and so for me, because I was watching like Toonami didn't exist, right? Crunchyroll wasn't even a twinkle in somebody's eye at that point.
Yeah.
But we were still able to get anime. We were, Suncoast Video. We all worked at the mall, so we would all just like walk out, like make the money, get paid, go buy anime, go to our friend's house and watch it. And I feel like once we started to see like people actually being able to make it by themselves, that to me was like the most attractive thing. It was like, whoa, what's this Lightwave program, and how do I get a hold of it, and how do I learn it?
That's cool.
So yeah, that's basically
really cool.
my primary motivation was like, okay, I need to do that.
I just noticed, are you wearing a drill from Gurren Lagann?
Yeah, stand up for a second.
That is so cool.
What is that shirt?
Eva shirt.
Eva, very nice.
I got my anime hem.
Oh my god.
Let's go.
Oh my god. Okay.
I'm in full regalia.
Okay, right. Mr. Otaku.
Yeah. Well, let's go to Sharon. What is your inspiration?
Okay.
Yeah.
So as to why I chose NPR instead of photorealism is because the industry was dominated by photorealism.
So just counterculture. You were just like,
that's a big brain move though. That's smart.
But while I was in school, like that was what we were taught, right? Like photorealism and the most common animation styles to help you get a job. That was basically the point of our program. But for me personally, I felt like aimless if I wasn't trying to develop a new aesthetic or trying to develop a new technology. So that was basically the reason. If I'm not doing something new, I feel useless.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. That's fair. So
That's relatable.
Yeah, it is a really new field. I think that's actually worth mentioning because it's like something that people didn't really know 3D could do for a long time. Because 3D was built on photorealistic engines and stuff. Like all the math and everything is there to calculate real light and all these things. So as something that we'll probably talk about later is that like when you do NPR, you have to break the engine to like get it to do what you want. And that's like a big part of like understanding this like art style. So it's also partially why I think a lot of people are really passionate about it, because you really do kind of carve your own path, which is cool. Yeah, fair enough. Do you have a specific piece of media that you think was like influential for that, or do you just like, nah, just...
I think you know.
Do I?
The movie that came out in my first year of university.
Ah, that one. Yeah. Is that the one that you happen to be a part of later on as you graduated?
Yeah, right? That's crazy.
So Spider-Verse is probably a good answer for a lot of us because it was the first big NPR movie. It was a huge success and like completely revolutionized people's way of perceiving the style. I think like thinking if it was viable or not commercially, like it just blew everyone out of the water. So valid. And also congratulations on manifesting that. Yeah. All right, Mira, your turn. Yes. Mira, if you say Hatsune Miku, that's valid, but you're welcome to say anything.
Black Rock Shooter.
Yeah, also valid.
I'm unlike probably everyone here. I'm not strictly bound to or perfectly aligned with non-photo real. Is that what that is for? Non-photorealistic rendering.
Yeah.
So I just started out animating videos in Source Filmmaker. It's Valve's proprietary software, but like SFM was holding me back for quite a while, and I realized that I wanted to make the jump to Blender. But when I made the jump to Blender, the first thing I was trying to do is figure out how to make it look like SFM because that's what I'm used to. But by the time I had spent enough time learning how to make it look like SFM, I realized I don't need to make it look like SFM.
True.
So I'm just doing my own thing. But the way the characters look in the animes, something I like those. So that's
your brain, right?
It just so happens that that's the aesthetic that I prefer when I'm making characters or using or animating characters.
Relatable.
It's just that that's not all the characters I animate.
That's fair. Which is interesting because you have a pretty diverse cast of characters in your videos where you just kind of combine like any style you want, which kind of is reminiscent of like Gumball, which has a bunch of different styles put together. They don't even care if it's like rendered photorealistically, but that is also a type of non-photorealistic rendering because you're breaking all the rules of reality. So it's like that's valid, and I think that's worth noting. It's not always the anime. All right, cool. Well, I guess I should go next because I haven't gone yet. So my personal inspiration is very similar to everybody else's, obviously. But like my original journey as an animator didn't actually start out with NPR. So I was originally going into just animation as a whole. I'm a director and animator, so I was making YouTube videos in kind of whatever style that I could. I actually started out with Minecraft, so that's cool. But it was like Minecraft, but like it was like photorealistic Minecraft. So it was like, ooh, that's like, whoa, RTX on. But ultimately, when I started doing more YouTube videos, I realized that photorealistic stuff wasn't actually super practical for a single person to make videos with. At the time, anyway, like cycles was super slow. I was using Blender, of course. And as the project sort of scaled up with like my ambitions, I was like, oh, actually, not only is NPR faster, and I was experimenting with it already because I liked the style, but not only is it faster, but it's also like prettier in a lot of ways. You have more control over things. And so I ended up going in that direction partially because of an artistic choice, which is a big part of it, but also partially because of a practical choice. Like it was going to be much more beneficial for the render times to be able to get more videos out. And I thought that was like pretty worthwhile. And I like that style. I was like very much of the mind that like if I was going to render it out, it had to look nice. So it was either like fully rendered or like intentionally rendered, and that's where the NPR comes from. Yeah. So that's my journey. But inspirations wise, I mean, obviously Spider-Verse, obviously anime, but yeah, Guilty Gear is also a good one, actually. Probably worth mentioning. Yeah. That one came much later. I was already doing it, but like it's been a huge inspiration to see what's possible. But yeah.
I like how you say intentionally rendered.
Yes.
That might be a good segue to the next question.
Right, which is this question that I just remembered. Wow. So that is a great segue. Thank you, Wyatt. Speaking of intentionally rendered things, there is a benefit to NPR, which of course I am touching on and experiencing in my own work, which is that you can control so many more things. Like every shadow color, every local color, everything that you see is usually hand-picked by the artist. And because of that, you can have so much more artistic freedom, I want to say, and artistic expression. So in my opinion, I think that's one of the greatest benefits of NPR. But of course, there are plenty of other ones. So if you guys have any artistic benefits you guys chose NPR for, I'd like to hear. But also, while you're there, if you feel like there's a particular commercial reason why it might be viable, bring that up as well. Because I think it's worth noting some people in the industry might be curious if it's something that they want to do on their project.
It's the subtle plug.
Yeah. I'm just saying, also we have a fork of Blender that you can use called Gu Engine. It's definitely something that's growing more in the industry. So I think it can be commercially viable. But let's talk about why. So Chris, we'll start with you. Especially because you're, obviously working on these big projects with Titmouse and stuff. What has your experience been with like the commercial viability and the artistic benefits of NPR?
I mean, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but it's just the fact that you're completely unlimited in your creativity. It was one of those things where on Pantheon, there was this thing that happened where the supervising director for the show, he kind of had an idea of like what we could do, right? But every single time I was able to deliver on something, he'd get these like really big eyes, like a kid, right? Just like, oh, can I have a little more? Can I have a little more? And there was never a time where I couldn't deliver on that. And so that to me was like a really nice, in terms of commercial viability, that was really nice to see, where it was just like to be able to fit into a 2D pipeline, and then to say like, for example, there was a shot that we had where we didn't have backgrounds. And I tried to do like a camera projection to like change the angle, because it was like the same set but in a different angle, and it was just like it wasn't working. And so I knew it was a ceiling shot, so I just built the ceiling and rigged it up to look like it was painted. And when I submitted it for dailies, they go, who did you get from the art department to paint this? And I was like, no, that's CG. And they were like, whoa, wait, what? And so then we went through the whole shot and like comped it in Blender and submitted it straight to edit. Like it didn't even go through comp. So it was just like for them to like see in real time the flexibility that Blender could bring, and the savings, just the fact that I saved the production money and time by not having to like take somebody off of what they were doing and put them onto this. That to me speaks volumes in terms of commercial viability and flexibility that one artist could bring to the project. And then just our team, when we got to the biggest point, we were only like 6 people, and we were doing like 200 shots in an episode. It was insane.
Holy crap.
And just the fact that we were, the fact that I was able to manage that and get 200 shots done. I think that was, we maxed out 200 shots in like one episode. That was our max.
That's fair.
And that was crazy, but we got it done, and we got it done on time. Like we were not the last people to deliver. So
wow. So I think you're touching on an interesting point, which is the scalability of like projects, especially 2D projects, which are generally very like expensive, like for backgrounds, for example. Like every camera angle is going to be a new background. So there's a lot of limitations that 2D has that 3D can unlock the potential of, especially for backgrounds, especially for these kind of like dynamic camera shots. I've seen it work really well, not only in your work, but also like with our work. We were able to do so much more with the cameras and stuff in 3D. So I think like being able to expand the possibilities of a project, even within the same team, like it might not be viable even to hire 200 background artists. Like that's just not going to happen. So that project will never exist. And now it can, right? Like that's something that's really cool about like getting this sort of 3D pipeline working. And you mentioned being integrated into a 2D pipeline. That is, I think, a big part of a lot of studios who are curious about this, if it can be integrated into an existing pipeline for 2D, because, you know, some people are not willing to commit fully to 3D, for example, and you don't have to. And that's a great example.
Right.
Yeah. Cool. Well, let's see. Sharon, why don't you tune in on your opinions on this?
I totally agree with what you two were saying. I personally think it's kind of like a 2D renaissance, where when we were first starting to animate, it was all just 2D. And then when 3D came out, we swung a little bit too far in the other direction. And now I feel like we're reaching a really nice middle point where both these art forms can collaborate. So yeah, huge benefit of NPR. From a corporate standpoint, I feel like it's super cost efficient, as you guys were saying, once you get the dev out of the way. And also, it's more accessible and democratic, in my opinion, because a lot of NPR doesn't need as much processing power as photorealistic CGI. And a lot of it can be made with like a cheap gaming laptop and free software at home, and also be run on phones. Like Genshin Impact is like a huge open world game that can be played on a mobile device that is this small.
How did they do that?
That, I mean, game engines is actually something we haven't touched on, because it's actually a really good point. Tons of games are going into NPR now. Like you look at Guilty Gear and you look at Genshin, you look at the popularity of just like, you know, these 3D games that are rendering in 2D. Not to mention like the renaissance of 2D games. Like they're also like Hades is incredible. Like stuff like that has also been popping up. But like, yeah, 3D games are also going in this direction, which is really, really cool. I mean, it's funny because like Wind Waker was like a revolutionary thing back in the day, and it was actually a long time before somebody else decided to do it again. It was like it was really unique at the time, and it stayed unique for a while. And now it's become more of like just this kind of gold standard of like the style that a lot of people are doing, which is really cool to see. And I think what you talked about, Sharon, with like this like hybridization, like people are starting to be like, oh, like we can go like in the middle. That's cool. I think that's something that a lot of people are going to find is going to kind of change the landscape of what defines a movie and what defines like a style. Like eventually, I think people will see movies like animated movies just as animated movies, and they won't even differentiate between 2D and 3D, which would be really interesting to see in the future.
Yeah.
That'll be cool.
I think another thing is that like movies, you can buy a ticket and like just go to the theater, or you can watch it on any streaming platform. But with games, a long time ago, people would have to invest so much money just to be able to play a game.
True.
And I feel like this is not something we think about because we already have these setups for work. But like the average person probably doesn't have like thousands of dollars for a gaming PC or even hundreds of dollars for a gaming console. So the fact that like mobile phones and the way that NPR has made gaming more accessible to like the general public is great, because I feel like everyone should be able to consume art.
That's so true. That is so true. That's especially true. Like I know mobile gaming is absolutely huge in like Asia and Southeast Asia. There's a big reason why I think like the industry there is booming, because there's so many people there who are now able to play these like AAA games, which is awesome. Yeah.
Also, like just being able to make it at home as well.
Yeah, that's also true.
Realistically, you're not going to be able to get like a render farm or like $1,000 setup when you're first starting out. So being able to like get a gaming laptop on sale, pick up Blender, and just being able to start to animate is huge, because programs like, I won't name them, but certain programs cost hundreds of dollars just to use, and that's not realistic for students or for people who are trying to learn how to make art.
Yes, that's crazy. Programs cost money. That's crazy. Yeah.
Right. I feel like that's something we forget a lot. You're
gonna name them, Chris? Oh God, we gotta hit this going. Oh no, I agree with all those points. So we will continue to remain cordial with the software that which we have not mentioned yet. But Blender is great. We love Blender. Blender's fantastic. Everybody loves Blender. So Mira, what are your thoughts? What do you got?
I don't have anything.
All right.
I don't have many things to say about how NPR has personally benefited me, because again, I'm not strictly loyal to NPR. If I want to make something, like everything that the benefits follow are like based on my own whims.
Yes.
So if I want a character that looks like NPR, and it just so happens to NPR that.
And I should say, when you have the whimsy of doing the thing, you can, because it's so easy, right? It's so accessible. It's not like I just randomly by chance of my brain wanting to do this, I'm going to create like a 10 million particle simulation at full resolution. Like that's going to take way more resources for a random person to do compared to just being like, oh, actually, I just kind of want to make it like look kind of cute and like anime or NPR looking, and now you can do it.
Yeah,
it does make it a lot easier to have that accessible, to choose that kind of style. That's cool.
We don't gatekeep.
Yeah,
true. It's true. Yeah.
Commercially speaking,
yes,
people have been exposed to photorealistic rendering for way too long, since the inception of 3D animation. Like one of the first things they started making were the physically based rendering stuff,
right.
like
yes,
just Pixar. People are tired of Pixar. Okay, I'm just getting this out of the way. People long for something that isn't strictly just realistic by face. The stuff that doesn't look like my face. People long for something different, and it's finally here. So this is new. It is investable, if that's a word.
Yeah.
So if that's what the people want, the investors will be like, okay, give us what the people want, so they can give us the money, so we can.
Yeah, it's business, doing business things. Yeah, of course.
Give us money.
It's became a pitch meeting somehow.
Yeah.
Do the thing that makes us money, and we'll give you the money.
Easy. But yeah, I agree. The Pixarification of 3D animation is a very real thing. Very real thing. And like it makes sense. Like it's been commercially viable for the past 20 plus years, and 30 years. And it's something that I know like they're trying to like get away from it a little bit, but they're not, like they're still kind of stuck in that style right now, like Disney and Pixar, their studios, because it works. But because they've been so successful, and because they've been one of the few studios that have been so successful, every other studio copies them, and like that's not great for creativity. So the fact that, honestly, in my opinion, Spider-Verse kind of broke that mold so hard, that I think really got people thinking, oh wait, I can actually make stuff between Pixar and Spider-Verse in a spectrum. Like there's quite a large range there, which is cool. But also just Spider-Verse itself is a cool style to emulate. So it's like something that I'm really happy to see is like people are actually branching out and not copying Disney and Pixar all the time. Which there's nothing wrong with it. It's just oversaturated. Yeah.
All these years.
Yeah. But yeah, Wyatt, what are your thoughts?
So just like a week ago, I was talking to a 2D artist who runs a small 2D studio. And I mean, his art is amazing. And like everyone at his studio is amazing. And they do primarily kind of anime style work, more in that kind of realistic, mature realm. And he was like, I know, like, I think my fatal flaw is that I am so set on hand drawing everything, like 90s Renaissance, that I'm kind of a relic in that way. And I was like, no, you're not. Like, you can't even think about it that way, because the more that I push forward and the more that I learn about 3D rendering and where we're going with NPR and all of these different techniques, which I think eventually we're going to stop using the term NPR because it's just going to be animation. Like maybe we will a little bit, but I would like for us to use photorealistic instead more often to denote specifically this is photorealistic, and then everything else is just, you just know it's NPR, it's animation. From the get-go, when I was making my thesis film, I was actually, because I wasn't an animation major, but I was approached by 2 animation majors to help them on their film. And it was a 3D guy and a 2D guy. And they wanted to like collab and do a 3D, 2D film. And I was like, this is the best thing ever. This is going to be so sweet. And at the time, because I really kind of had a background in like VFX compositing, mainly for live action stuff, but I was like, the challenge of taking the 2D characters, putting them in the 3D world, I was I was like, the possibilities are endless here. This is going to be amazing because it's the best of both worlds. And back then, I felt as though NPR in 3D hadn't really pinged human characters yet. I hadn't seen anyone like really do it just right. You know, that was like 2017, 19. You know, I mean, after the first Spider-Verse, but like still like in the indie scene, there were really few people that were like pushing. You were one of them, Dillon.
Oh, cool.
I think you were.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Probably.
I forgot that was the thing. Yeah, continue.
But so for that project, we like, because it was like kind of a mecha chase scene. So we did the mechs in 3D, and then the human characters were 2D. And that was just a blast because every shot was a new challenge with the compositing of taking like these characters, putting them in the mecha, and the mecha had to run around. And I had so much fun on that I was like, I just want to do more of this. And once I saw people do more with fully 3D characters in 3D NPR style, I was like, oh, maybe it's possible now. That would be cool. The benefit always for me was to achieve not just the look and the aesthetic of 2D, but the expressiveness and the liveliness. Those were the two really big things, because when a character moves and is animated in 2D, there are no restrictions, and you can open the mouth as wide as you want. Think about Charlie Brown when he like yells, you know, his mouth takes up his whole head. You know,
very true. That's
something that's really difficult to do in 3D. I was always concerned with getting put in a box in that way. Yeah. Because I really enjoy those cartoonish moments. I think that's what animation is, one of the unique things it can bring to the table, is like externalizing those emotions in big ways.
Yeah.
So
fascinating.
So I was hesitant to jump into fully 3D characters, and once I started seeing that you can kind of get there, taking the leap was really fun, because that was just like a whole other rabbit hole of all these new techniques that no one else is using in 3D at all. And I think it's interesting that we touched on game engines, because that's because Blender's Eevee, which is kind of what we use primarily to emulate a 2D style these days, is essentially, it's kind of the same science as a game engine.
Yeah, rasterization based.
Rasterization based. And the real-time feedback and everything that you get out of essentially a game engine, out of a raster pipeline, is so nice. I can see a final image while I'm working on it. It feels like you're drawing again, like you have that instant feedback.
Exactly. Which is such a perfect like loop around to what you're talking about at the beginning, because like everything you were talking about, like you were saying like your friend feels like a relic because he's a 2D animator or 2D artist.
Yeah. I think he's more relevant than ever, especially right now.
I think so. What I think is interesting is like while the 3D NPR scene is developing, it is absolutely following in the paths of these expert 2D artists who have defined the style.
Oh yeah.
The character expressions you talked about is also really cool, because I think it's something that like we haven't really mentioned yet, and it is such a huge benefit for NPR. But not because it's like an inherent value of it, but it's because NPR is really more of a mindset, right? So like when people are doing NPR stuff, they find these solutions to do these things that 2D artists can do, and that's one of them. Like making a character super expressive is so valuable. Whereas like in a photorealistic thing, it's like, oh, can it move like a human face? Cool, like it's good enough, right? Like that's all they usually need. But like NPR artists and like, you know, 2D artists, they're able to push it, and because of that are able to control their expressions and really be intentional about that kind of stuff again, which is awesome.
Yeah, and it becomes more evocative commercially. So I've literally had clients ask me, can we make this stylized?
Interesting.
Specifically because, like, for various reasons, but a big one that I've heard a lot is that they're afraid of the uncanny valley. They're afraid if they reach too far, if they are Icarus with wax wings and they reach too far for photorealism, but they don't achieve it, they're going to alienate their entire audience. Yeah. That can be a really hard like a do not pass go for some clients. And other projects, it's just other projects I have to convince them like, no, this script is perfect for really cartoony characters, even though the subject matter is very heavy. Like the cartoonish characters are going to be perfect in this. And like they are. And I've had both ends of the spectrum types of conversations with clients where like sometimes they aren't really married to one thing or the other and they take some convincing. And others where they are already, they're dead set on having something stylized. And so I think that like commercially speaking, I think the work is already looking for this. Sometimes they don't know it yet.
Yeah.
And sometimes they do. And so you're not doing yourself a favor if you're not learning some NPR techniques.
That's true. What's interesting about that is like I think some clients might even pick NPR stuff to stand out, right? Because like a lot of photorealistic stuff kind of blends in with each other. Like you don't really get a solid like unique brand out of it. And whereas NPR, because you have so much control over like the designs and like the movement, it just suddenly it has like a signature to it now, and suddenly it feels so much better. So that's really cool. I was also gonna say, you talked about the uncanny valley, which is fascinating. Yeah. So like for those of you guys who don't know, the uncanny valley is like whenever you have something that is almost real, usually a human face. It's almost real looking, but it's not quite there. Maybe the subsurface scattering is off or something. It just moves weird. That will freak people out. More so than like if it was just bad. Like, yeah. So it's the closer you get, the worse it gets. And then like once you get to the actual thing, it's fine. But like before that, it's like the worst ever. So yeah, I know, for example, I think like Borderlands was one of the, like it was a game that like tried to get away from that specifically because they couldn't achieve it. So they're like, oh, we're just like stylize everything, and like worked out great. And their game also sticks out very uniquely amongst the rest. And it was one of the earlier NPR style
Everybody
games.
knows Borderlands because of their art style.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, it's a very artistic choice. But yeah, so that segues into our next question, which is because you talked about how 2D artists are really kind of like frontiering the sort of like expertise on what makes good animation, what makes good artistic choices. They have laid out this foundation for us. But the question for us individually is, do each of us have a background in 2D illustration or animation? And do you think it's necessary as an artist to be a 2D artist first before you do 3D NPR stuff? I'll go first real quick because, you know, my answer is pretty simple. I did grow up drawing. I drew all the time. But as soon as I started animating, I stopped. So it didn't really help me. But it's something that I personally think I could definitely pursue more. So I don't think it's necessary personally. It's something you can definitely emulate through studying and research and things like that. But understanding the actual 2D decisions that people make from the get-go innately, intuitively, because you yourself are a 2D artist, will absolutely make you make better decisions way earlier, you know, like in your career. So like having that background is going to be helpful. Is it something that like you have to dedicate 10 years of your life to in order to just do NPR? No, absolutely not. But yeah, that's my experience. So kind of yes, but also kind of no. So we'll go with Mira. What's your experience with 2D and 3D?
In case you didn't know, I do not have a formal animation background.
That's crazy.
In fact, I don't know why.
Yeah, real quick.
Everything.
Yeah, real quick for I also don't have an animation degree. Wyatt, you said you don't have an animation degree. You have a film degree. Is that right?
It's actually a TV degree.
Oh, fair enough. Yeah. Sorry, my bad.
It's basically the same thing.
My bad. But yeah.
No.
Chris, what's your background? What's your background?
I have a bachelor's degree in graphic design.
Oh, nice.
Which is not animation based, but has a lot of very useful things in it.
Yeah.
Right. Color theory, obviously design, composition, stuff that goes into designing a scene. But no, I'm self-taught when it comes to animation. I do have a background in illustration. I've been drawing since I was a little kid. I still draw. I doodle in my notepad all the time. I would say the answer to the question is you don't need a background in illustration to do 3D animation, especially NPR, but it definitely helps. And for a lot of the reasons that we've already talked about, obviously silhouette, line, composition, appeal, right? All of the main, like, the 12 principles of animation and all that stuff, like to experience the medium through different lenses helps you become a better and more well-rounded artist, right? If you learn a little painting, like my background painting skills are not great, but I work on them every time I need to paint a background and I get better, right? And then that helps me when I want to compose a background, maybe do it 3D first, right? That was the cool thing again about being on Pantheon, was having key art to match, right? And having to match such a high level and being like, okay, I need to make sure my NPR art matches exactly this, but then also being able to go back and say, what went into making that painting look so good? And then trying to replicate that myself makes me better at doing NPR all around.
Yeah, I think like having a 2D background specifically helps it helps train your eye to see those things. Like, I think it's very different for someone to just be like, oh, like this is a painting, this is like, I'm going to try to make it in 3D. You're very easily going to be like, you're going to see the big strokes, but not the details. And like when you're a 2D artist, you can really see what makes the difference. And I think that's one reason why it's super helpful. And I've noticed that in my own work for absolutely.
Right. Yeah, it's that last 10%, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Always that last.
Yeah.
Right there.
It's a really good just something to bring up, where a lot of people talk about how things like clock 3D and like how 3D sometimes doesn't read quite as well. Like there's obviously going to be some NPR that people probably have experienced who are watching where it's like not very convincing as 2D, or it's not something that they really enjoy as a style and they're like, oh, that's not for me. There's definitely going to be NPR out there that isn't quite like 2D like, and it's sometimes it's an artistic choice, which is fine. Other times it's people who are missing that 10%. And that's where that 2D background helps a ton. And I think viewers, audiences will recognize when it doesn't quite hit right. So it's important to have that background to be able to push your NPR into that right direction. I just realized, Sharon, you didn't mention what degree you have. So we've all mentioned it.
I have a 3D animation degree, but I studied 2D animation for. Oh, thank you.
She's the expert in the room.
Yeah, she's the only one with a degree. Let's go.
She's got the degree, the diplomas on the wall.
Okay, I'm done. I'm out.
And I studied 2 years of 2D animation in a university level when I was in high school.
Oh wow!
Yeah, a little bit of both.
Oh wow, that's really cool.
And my personal opinion is that I do not believe anybody has to be formally educated.
That's fair.
And
yeah.
Here's my 2 cents on that, right? Because oftentimes NPR work specifically is free from reality. So in VFX or CGI, you can take a photo or a video and you just need to go one-to-one with reality. And even though it's technical skill, it's a different type of technical skill. And when you're working in NPR, you have to develop your own style. So skills like color theory, shape language, and caricature really, really help. Because it's not like when you're drawing a tree photorealistically, you just look at the tree in real life and be like, oh, okay, it looks like this because that's what reality looks like. When you draw a tree in NPR, you have to make decisions about why it looks the way it does because you can do anything. Yeah. So like, why is it round? Why are the leaves that shape? Is the trunk skinny or super thick? And why did you do that? What does this have to do with the storytelling? What does this have to do with the environment? And how does it actually look visually? Because you can make like design choices that are connected to the story, but then you look at it and it looks really ugly.
That's true.
Right.
Yeah.
So I feel like as long as you have these skills, you're fine.
That's fair. That's interesting. So picking up those skills even outside of 2D illustration would still be very helpful.
I think so. It's just understanding which choices are deliberate and why they're made.
Yeah.
And you're good to go because then you know how to make those choices yourself.
Yeah, I agree. Well,
I just want to add something onto that.
Yeah, please.
So I think it's really important what Sharon touched on is the fundamentals, right? What you're talking about is the decisions that you're making, because there is such a thing as being too indoctrinated in the way things are supposed to be done.
Yeah.
And I run up against that a lot when I went into the film industry, and then I learned like this is how you're supposed to do everything, and it's supposed to, there's a modeler and there's a rigger and then there's a texture artist and then there's a surfacing, and it's hard for me sometimes to get my brain out of that mode when I'm working on independent projects where it's just like I see people on YouTube just like doing it, And I'm like, I can't, my brain doesn't even compute that, because I'm just like, no, you have to have it. You have to make a rig. You can't just use an auto rigger. You know, sometimes I get really caught up in like the process. So there is a certain appeal to actually being free to make decisions and just taking those principles and applying the principles, as opposed to being locked into, you know, your indoctrination, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes school is useful, but school definitely sometimes gets your brain like locked in a certain way.
Very, very true.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely attribute a lot of our decision making in like the studio to the fact that I have no formal education. Like I don't know what's going on. So like I make up most everything, and I'm just like, I got to figure this out anyway. So we're going to do it. And I think that goes back to what we said earlier about NPR being a mindset, because I think it ultimately is this mindset of like total freedom. You can do whatever, and being able to work within that space is really, really cool. So Wyatt, what is your background in 2D and 3D, and how do you think it's helped and all these other things?
So story time. When I was younger, I wanted to be a cartoonist because I really
same.
liked.
Bro, actually,
Let's go.
Twins, dude.
Let's go.
Let's go.
I used to watch, or not watch, but I used to read like Garfield and like Calvin and Hobbes and Dilbert and you know, just like like we would get the Sunday funnies every week, and I'd like just read every comic strip, and that was my life when I was a kid.
It's good shit.
And I wanted to be and so I did like for literal grades of not like I was graded on them, but like throughout grade school, I would make comic strips, and it was like always changing and everything, and just had like a great time. And then I had an art teacher, and I'll never forget this, in 7th grade, who assigned me sketchbook homework. And that just killed me. Like I kept drawing, but I never took another art class after that. So from there, like I would continue to draw, obviously, because I can't stop drawing. And I would learn a lot just on my own by doing things. And I would say I do have a pretty decent background in illustration, more than someone with none. I can do more than a stick figure. I used to say that you don't need to be able to draw to do 3D. I used to say that because I would get asked that question sometimes.
Right.
But the more I get into it, the more I think you kind of do. You kind of do, because even at the most base level, you have to be able to communicate what's in your head to someone else.
Yeah.
And when you're working with a team, if it's just you, that's fine. Like you have the idea, you can go, you can do it, you know? But when you're in a team, at the most basic level, you have to take something out of your head and put it on either a sheet of paper or a screen and show somebody like, this is what I'm thinking for this shot. And so I think that's why like I get so particular about visuals is because I know, like, because I can clearly see it in my head.
Because you have a solid background in 2D. That really helps a lot. Yeah.
Interesting. I feel like some people sometimes, especially with 3D, it's more attractive to people sometimes because there's like a checklist. Because there's like, and especially photorealism is really guilty of this. And I think this is kind of why what Chris is talking about, like the system is like, you have a modeler, you have a rigger, and then you go to the texturing and the surfacing artist. Like it's a pipeline. There's a checklist, and you can just kind of go through the motions, and you'll get something that looks good at the end if you do. But NPR is so different from that. In some ways, it's way more challenging because you can't follow the checklist exactly. You have to. The checklist like comes from within. Like you kind of make it up as you go. That's kind of what like an art style is. That's like. What is unique about it. And so sometimes some younger, less experienced artists, it won't be as good as what they were hoping it would be. Their first attempt. And I mean, keep trying, keep going. But maybe it's because you were expecting there to be a checklist. And for NPR, I haven't found there to be one. Every shot is different. Everything demands something new.
Yeah, you bring up some good points. I think like we've already talked about like this 10% of like getting that 3D render to look 2D. I think that's very relevant to what you're just saying with like people who are just starting out. So that's definitely something that I would recommend people studying for the sake of getting to a point where you're satisfied with it. At the beginning, it can really help to reference 2D stuff, even if you're not a 2D artist, for example, and just really study what makes it good. And there is definitely that aspect of it that helps people probably enjoy it more. Which is partially why it's more required. I also think it's interesting that you talked about the draw overs. This is not something that's relevant to everybody because it's it's a thing for like directors. So like I relate very hard to this. Like if I'm giving feedback, I want to be able to draw over in a relatively detailed way to communicate like this is a pose that we need, this is a silhouette that we need. That kind of thing is really important to work in a team. And I don't think it's just for directors, to be fair, but like anytime you want to give feedback or a critique to somebody who needs it for achieving a more 2D look, 2D's the way you have to draw it. You know what I mean? Yeah.
To be fair, even when you're working in a photoreal pipeline, usually
That
your
helps.
art director or whoever is still doing a draw over of some kind. It's just like
very true. Very, very true. Yeah, I think people underestimate how much 2D is already being used in every pipeline already. Like concept art, mood boards, you know, even compositing is technically a lot of compositing and like color grading is in 2D, right? Stuff like that. But yeah, fair enough. Well, speaking of how much it's being used right now, there's one last question about how you think the industry will be using NPR, either now or in the future, in a way that you think would be exciting, right? Let's start with Sharon.
the one closest to the
Why
industry.
not? Yeah, exactly.
What's the real answer, Sharon?
Yeah, what are they doing up there?
Unfortunately, I can't go into specifics because I would get sued and die. There's actually a sniper behind my laptop right now.
Yeah.
Obviously, the Spider-Verses, Mitchell's versus the Machines as Sony-specific examples.
Yes.
But I feel like a lot more studios than people think are going into NPR, especially now. I'm pretty sure, like, we can say NPR is fully mainstream at this point.
That's true.
It's no longer an underground thing at all.
Yeah.
Studios everywhere are doing it, and they're bigger names than people think. Like, over the next couple of years, you guys can expect to see a lot more movies coming out in this style. I can't say which ones, obviously, but they're
more.
Yes.
What's interesting is that, like, when you actually talk to people from these studios, a lot of people are really interested in using Blender, for example, or going more into. Why is this news to you guys? I thought everyone knew.
I'm just happy
Nobody
to hear
tells
it
us anything.
Okay, that's fair. Obviously, we use Blender at Sony, and some other studios are looking into it. There are studios that are interested in collaborating with other studios that are working in this style. So there's a huge like development in the mainstream industry, and I feel like people need to know this because people don't respect NPR enough. I feel like a lot of times people see something cartoony and they're like, "Oh, well, like that's not quality." That's not true.
Facts.
Okay, it's not easy.
Facts.
It's not easy.
Yeah.
The entire team on Spider-Verse can testify.
Oh yeah, it is not easy to do NPR. I think that's
It's
something
not.
that, like, God, it's like, again, because we have to break the engine to achieve it. There's so many things that the artists have to do to just like research and develop how you're even going to achieve the thing, and then on top of that, like, there's so much more hand-drawn stuff on top of that. Like, it's not computer generated all the time either. It's not.
We spend a lot of time at the beginning being like, oh, NPR is great. Like, it's fast render times. Like, one person can do it.
Yeah.
Like, all of that is true, but also it's really hard because
I think
you are doing something completely new. Like, there's no, they haven't written the book on this yet.
They haven't.
Yeah, I think because of that, NPR is difficult partially because there are a lot of people with a lot of scattered efforts, and there are people who have done really good work on their own.
Yeah.
But obviously, like with 3D developing, it became stronger because everyone sort of united their efforts and started streamlining things.
True.
And I feel like we're starting to do that with NPR now. People are starting to exchange like knowledge and information about how they did stuff. And we're starting to work towards building stuff together and making it one easier, more accessible, and maybe developing some actual programs and pipes that are specialized for this. At least we are. So
yeah, that's really, I mean, it's exciting. I think it's like very promising for people who like the style to know that it's commercially viable. And being picked up. I think like the interesting thing to me is that like what you mentioned about people sharing their ideas about NPR, it seems to me like as the media kind of matures, people are seeing patterns emerge on like what every project seems to need or want. And it's those patterns that are going to establish the tools and like the foundations of movies going forward. And it's going to be so much easier in the future. Yeah.
To be fair,
Yeah.
I think that's just because we reuse stuff from past movies.
That's
So
also
it's been
fair.
so easy to stick with the traditional 3D style for so long because we'll just like grab half the stuff from a different movie or recycle the entire pipe. We don't have to do anything new. We just have to make the movie.
Yeah.
But with NPR, nothing's been built yet. So it's more expensive in that regard, but it's cheaper in the long run, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the more we make NPR movies, the easier it's gonna get because we'll have more stuff to fall back on. We'll have more stuff we can reuse and we'll have more resources. But right now we're kind of like in new territory. But I feel like we're not anymore. We're already getting there. So it's fine.
Yeah. We're well into like the race. Most
A couple
movies,
years ago, we were in the trenches.
yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Yeah. Most movies now have at least like some tools and assets that are around, you know, somewhere floating in the ether. Well, next we'll go to Chris. I'm sure you have some thoughts on this as well as working on Titmouse. What are your thoughts?
Well, just again to buttress onto what Sharon was saying, even though it sucks that there were huge layoffs at DreamWorks, it was announced that they are outsourcing to Sony. So one could maybe assume that, or at least make a educated guess that maybe they're outsourcing to Sony with the intention of broadening their horizons visually, without Sharon getting assassinated. You know, we can infer that maybe they're interested in seeing what NPR style has to offer them. I think that the for me, Blender is a program. It's something that it just, you know, as you work in the program, it's sort of like Neo, right? When he like wakes up to the Matrix, like it's like when I'm in the thick of production,
to believe.
Yeah, there's not a day that goes by that I'm not like, whoa, you know, like you see the Matrix just like reveal, and I feel like
You're staring at the default cube.
Yeah, and then the Matrix just goes down behind the default cube.
Oh my god!
Every tutorial begins with deleting the default cube, and I'm like, I need to make a tutorial where it's like, this is how you set up a default scene so that you don't have to delete your cube every time.
I like deleting it.
Anyways. Yeah,
it's my old friend. I come back to him.
I keep
got really tired of like pressing the same button.
It's lonely coming back to an empty house.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I used a camera in my scene. It's there.
Oh, okay. Fair enough. Yeah.
But anyways, yeah, I feel like Blender it empowers creativity, right? The more you learn about the program, the more it unlocks your own creativity. The more the it's like establishing new neural connections. You're literally just sitting here going, oh, I can do this now, and I can connect these two things together and make this awesome thing that happens. And I feel like that sort of phenomenon is gonna just envelop the entire industry. The more people start to adopt Blender, the more people start to see like, oh, this isn't just a free program, right? This is, oh, it's free, so it's not industry standard. No. This Blender's awesome. It does great things, and you know, it literally just takes you diving into it and realizing, oh, it's not that you know, X, Y, or Z program is the right way to do it. It's that I've been trying to fist fight somebody like this the whole time, and now I can actually sit here with my stance, and I'm good to go, right?
Yeah.
So that for me is like the freeing aspect of Blender, where it's like, oh, I don't have to dance through all these hoops just to get to do one thing. Like I literally can just press a button and it goes.
Yeah.
So for me, that's where I think it's headed. It's just like unlocking the team's creativity at all levels, and being able to express yourself freely.
That's cool. When you mentioned the team, I think that's interesting because, first of all, because Blender is so accessible, hopefully in the future, like so many people are going to have it under their belts, ideally, because anyone can learn it. It's fantastic. And so that's going to actually bring in a lot of cool pipeline things in the future when like you bring someone on and like they already know Blender. So it's like, oh, cool, you're doing characters, you're doing backgrounds, you're doing effects. Oh, like do you do it in Blender? Okay, cool. We'll just all work together and like apply the NPR magic as well if you want to. But like that mesh of like, you know, everyone's skills is such a cool thing to see, hopefully in the future in the industry, which would be awesome.
And for all of you kids, I got hired because I knew Blender, so I was hired specifically for that. So you can get a job, you can get an industry job while knowing Blender.
That's actually amazing. That's amazing. Yeah, well, because that's actually
that's huge.
Yeah, well, because when I was in school, they said, oh, like that's not, you can't get a job learning Blender. There's no way. Like everyone learns
It's the
Maya.
same thing to me.
Yeah, fair. Yeah.
I would go hang out in like the digital arts wing of the film school.
Yeah.
And I would like get all my friends together and they'd be like, yo, have you seen what Blender 2.8 can do? Because I was just like self-teaching myself. And all these kids are in like their Maya classes. And I'm like, bro, you don't even know. Like I turned Eevee on. They're like, it's rendering in real time. And then like the professor would walk over and I'd be like, yo, watch this grease pencil demo, you know?
Yeah.
And they'd be like, oh, wow, that's interesting. Okay. And then like, and then they'd like walk away and I'd start trying to teach everybody in the class Blender. One of my friends actually went back to teach at school recently as like as an instructor for like an intro to 3D class. And there were all these 2D kids in his section because it was part of the curriculum. Like for animation, even though they were emphasizing in 2D, they had to take a 3D course. And so I was like, please let me substitute for you one day. And I'll teach them all grease pencil in one day. Wow. And that was such a fun class, just like a 3-hour session of like, here's how we can grease pencil. It was so fun.
That's crazy. I feel like, I mean, that alone is something that I feel like would open people's eyes and change their lives. Like their entire trajectory.
That's what I'm hoping.
Different.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because like suddenly it's like, oh, you can 2D animate in a 3D software. That's like, it's one of the only places you can really do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so cool. I mean, Sharon can speak on the value of that probably quite well. Grease pencil and how powerful it is.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
I thought you were talking about like school, and I was like, oh, my school experience with Blender was a little whole other story. Anyway,
I'm sure they're very supportive.
We use grease pencil at Sony Pictures Imageworks. We used it on Across the Spider-Verse. I'm not sure if it was on Mitchell's. I can double check on that. But we've also been using it on future projects that are unannounced. But yeah, grease pencil is definitely a huge MVP at Sony. For animators as well. I'm pretty sure people have seen clips floating around where the animators actually do the smears with grease pencil. Just import their stuff in the scene, and they could just draw it themselves, which is great because it streamlines the pipe, right? Because if you animate something and you have to hand off your shot to a completely different artist for them to add the smears afterward, it kind of breaks the continuity, it breaks the flow. But if you can just do it all yourself, especially since Blender's so easy to pick up, if you can just do everything yourself, then like you have full control and mastery over that shot, and you can execute your vision. Great.
Speaking of taking cues from 2D, like that's how a 2D artist would draw the smears in there on their frames themselves. And that I feel like something like smears is so intrinsic to the movement and the feeling of like the motion of a character that handing it off would just feel weird.
Yeah.
I feel like someone else is animating your scene.
Yeah.
Did you see that talk? This is a little bit unrelated, but there was a talk that one of the animators in How to Train Your Dragon did, where he would animate the dragons, but the water effects would like splash over his animation, so you couldn't see any of his work.
Oh, no.
And I was like, I think this is why streamlining the pipe is really important.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair.
So the original vision can be preserved. But anyway.
Yeah. Oh, fascinating. I was gonna say, just for people who don't know, what are smears?
So if I did
exactly what you guys
did, and you were to pause, if I was to do the animation, and you paused me right here, whatever's happening with my fingers is gonna translate into some weird abstract shape that follows the arc of whatever I'm doing, you know?
Yeah. So
just
what it is,
watch Looney Tunes and pause at any time.
Yeah, pretty much. It's like it's a 2D animator's way of replacing motion blur, because we don't have motion blur in 2D because there's, it won't look good anyway. But basically they stretch, right? Like they stretch or smear the silhouette of the character to pretend like it's, yeah. So there you go.
I love how we also
That's a very good non-verbal way to communicate. So
artistic interpretation of motion that normally can't be captured by the human eye.
Yes, exactly. I think we have Mira. What is your opinion on the industry and where it's going?
Okay, so I'm a little worried that people will go into, we want Spider-Verse. And that's all that we have. And naturally, there are like more possibilities in what you can do in NPR, but that depends on the directors and like what they want.
What you bring up is interesting, Mira, because I think you have a very interesting concern about basically the opposite of Pixarification, which is Spider-Versification, right? That's it's a legitimate concern. Like I can definitely see that happening. I know that there's been a lot of NPR movies and stuff that have come out that have tried to emulate that. I will say though, like personally, I've seen quite a lot of variety. Like one of the things that Spider-Verse does specifically, for example, is like they do like chromatic aberration for DOF, and like they're still one of the few people who do that right now. Like it's not something that everyone's copying. They're taking their own takes on like what kind of style they want to go for. So I'm optimistic about it. I think something that like is unique about NPR is because you have to handcraft it to get to that point. The intentional decisions that they take along the way bring them somewhere else by nature. Whereas like for Pixar, like we talked about with the checklist, like Wyatt was talking about how 3D is kind of very easy to like photorealistic stuff is very easy to kind of just check things off and be like, okay, we're good. You can do that with Pixarification because everything is so streamlined and built for that. So maybe it'll happen in the future if we have like an engine that like specifically specializes in like Spider-Verse style and it's like only does this, like there's like a button to like press like turn into Spider-Verse and then like it maybe everyone will do that. But for now I actually think it's quite difficult to emulate it in a way that would be efficient or even meaningful. So Spider-Verse is in a pretty good spot right now in my opinion. Yeah,
I would agree with that.
I
understand what Mira is concerned about. Because
the Marvel people did make that What If
series?
That was in NPR.
I was gonna bring up What If. You aren't mentioning What If in the same sentence as Spider-Verse. Maybe you're mentioning Arcane in the same sentence as Spider-Verse.
Fair.
Even though Arcane is a very different look, like but Arcane is another one of those situations where Riot was willing and able to give Fortiche Studio the room and like the time that they needed to make it what it is. And so it's I mean I didn't have a point at the end of all that. I was just kind of like stating a bunch of facts.
No, it's good because what you're saying basically is like there is commercial viability in NPR, which has its drawbacks as well, which is that it attracts people who are trying to make a quick buck. And
it's going to require the people that are making these purchase orders for shows or movies or whatever to understand that this is an artistic endeavor, not it's something else.
And you're optimistic that will be the case, moving forward.
I am because we got Spider-Verse and then like a year or two later we got Arcane and then like what's the next Spider-Verse, and I mean Mitchell's and Machines
Turtles.
and like
Turtles.
Oh my gosh, Mutant Mayhem. Like so we're seeing these things just happen. And even in the indie scene, like we're seeing more and more of these things happen and they all look really good. And so I am optimistic that NPR is really going to get bigger. Than it is, even more mainstream.
I agree. I agree.
I guess the last point is that NPR is powerful, but in the words of someone that like I don't remember his name, with great power comes great responsibility, and I don't know why he said that, but it stuck with me, So
that would stick with me.
So hopefully people will realize there's a lot of great art to be made in this style, and that's why everybody has been watching us for the past hour and a half. So hopefully.
That's how long we've been recording, for those of you that are watching the cut down version.
So we've been talking for a while, but I really enjoyed the talk. I think people who are listening probably really enjoyed everyone's perspectives. So thank you for listening, and we really enjoyed it. That was good. Did you guys have fun?
Oh yeah.
We might not have been able to recapture the magic of the original, but I feel like this is pretty good.
It's okay. We have it in there's a small corner where you can see the original panel.
We're taking that magic and we're bringing it in.
It's here.
The only thing missing are the awesome lens flares.
We can add that in post. It's fine. Thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Bye.
Bye.